Hello, everybody. It is great to be here again today. And my name is Gary Fowler, and I am the host today of LaToken VCTV. And we are going to talk about startup advisory and how important it is for each and every one of you. I'm a serial entrepreneur and investor. I've done 17 startups and been involved in 2 unicorns. I was on the original management team at Click Software that was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion, and also Eva.ai, an AI HR tech company. And it's with great pleasure. I have a lot of my friends today here. Julio, Fabio, Raghu, Peter's coming in from the Wimmer family office. Great to be here. Julio, a little bit about yourself.
Greetings from New York City. Cold, but not as cold as it was last weekend. Great to see all of you. Thank you for the invite. New York Bay Capital is an advisory company based here in New York City. Founded almost 6 or 7 years ago. And among one of the things we do is we advise startups. It's not the only thing we do. We tend to be doing larger transactions. But when it comes to startups, we really like people who are starting companies, and we like to give them advice. Most of the time for free. This is something people don't know, but when you ask for advice, if you are talking to the right person, they'll give you advice. And so when I looked at the name of this panel, I was very excited to join it because I think that a lot of people need a lot of advice to be successful, and that's what we're hoping to do with our clients and friends.
Yeah, it's not about giving the advice. It's about the people wanting to receive it. That's the most important thing, isn't it, Julio? With that, Raghu?
Yes, great to see everyone. I'm Raghu Rao from Princeton, New Jersey. This is a very favorite topic. I am a former VSTID chair where I had several peer advisory boards, one for CEOs, one for trusted advisors, and one for key executives. I'm also an investor as well as partner in a Ascendo cross-border emerging Asia fund, and I really enjoy the early stage investment, especially in the deep tech area.
And especially when we find those graduates from places like IIT that want to go global, huh, Raghu?
That's right.
Fabio.
I'm an economist by training. I have a PhD from the University of Chicago in economics. Before becoming involved in startups as partner of Golden Eagle in New York, I worked at the International Monetary Fund, at the European Central Bank for the launch of the euro, Goldman Sachs in London, various sovereign institutions in the Arabian Peninsula, the last one of which was as chief strategist of the Oman Investment Fund, which is a sovereign wealth fund of the Sultanate of Oman, as the name clearly suggests.
The Sultan of Oman?
Sultanate of... Yeah,
I didn't even know they were real sultans. I thought it was just something in parts of Arabia, No.
There are 2 sultans. One is in Brunei, one is in Oman.
And so what happened? What's a sultan like? Are they like...
Is a king, essentially.
The king, yeah? Interesting. And what's under a sultan? Is there like a prince sultan? Is there like a lower level? How does it work?
Well, in theory, it's more like an emperor, because the Sultan was the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, the one that was ruled out of what is now called Istanbul. Under the Romans was called Constantinople, and or Byzantium during the Middle Age, and so the empire lasted until World War I, and they were ruling over most of North Africa, Eastern Mediterranean, and beyond. So it was
quite large empire. The key is, if you get to the Sultan, you're going to find a lot of money and maybe a great opportunity to get some investment, correct?
Well, the Southern has, his own wealth managed professionally, obviously, and then what I was doing was managing the wealth of the peoples of Oman. So the Sovereign Wealth Fund was managing the oil revenues. Which weren't spent on social programs or other public expenditures, and so they were saved. They were put in a coffer, and we were managing this pile of money.
That's great. Well, it sounds like a good pile of money to manage. So let's talk about Raghu. I want you to talk about startup advisory, and also it's not just about the advice; it's about what kind of optics, how that looks to the community out there. So can you talk a little bit about that? One is the advice, but two is how does it look at potential investors when you have superstars on your advisory board?
Sure. I think the advisory board is a key part of the company that gives it credibility, especially when there is the early stages where you don't have capital to employ, top professional people. Along with the founders, the advisory board can, basically give a lot of credibility to the company. And usually, I see them as two, because especially in technology companies, there's a technical or scientific advisory board, and then there is the business or strategic advisory board. So both those are very important because the technology is important, but also how you go to market and scale. And the advisors should, you should get the type of advisors who can open doors, help you with getting investment, as well as governance. I mean, although in the startup usually the fiduciary board is pretty small, but the advisory board can also act as a from advice in terms of governance. So I think it's very important. And something like a peer advisory board that I was running, Vistage, is mostly CEOs of owner operator companies, which a little different breed than they don't yet have hired management. They're usually the CEO is the operator and founder. So that was a very good segment because that helped me learn about a lot of issues that are involved in they're past the startup stage, but on the scale up stage. But I've also been involved in startups from ground up, where they're still, getting the pre-seed and seed investment and going forward. But I think the advisors are key to having a professional structure and quick scale up. I mean, you kind of learn not only what to do but what not to do. So.
What not to do. So I like that. Julio, we spoke about opening the doors. How important is it to have advisors that can open doors?
Very important, but also which doors?
Because exactly. Let's talk about that.
Well, there is always a skill set that an entrepreneur has, and if an entrepreneur does his homework or her homework, he or she writes a list of their skills that they know they have. The idea of advisory is to always complement on the skills that you already have, not to duplicate them. But in life, we tend to hang around people we like, and they tend to have the same skills we have, and so it could be challenging to find people who have a complementary set of skills. The internet makes it a little easier these days by looking around in LinkedIn to see who might have complementary skills. But if you think you're a good team builder, then focus on maybe people who tended to have shined on their own because they have different skills. They're fighters. They don't necessarily delegate. They go and get things. But vice versa. My point here is it's more of a human skills set decision than it is, oh, I just want to call an investment banker, or I just want to call a lawyer, or I just want to call someone who's connected in the industry. If you focus on the skill set, it's going to be maybe a little bit more challenging in those advisory board meetings because people are different, but it's going to end up opening more doors and more doors that you wouldn't have necessarily gone to on your own. And I think that this is a game of having, many opportunities open up for you so that you can then make a decision as to which path to take. There are many paths, but let's try to keep the options open. And it starts with the people you meet and the people you invite to be part of your organization.
Yeah, you're right about it. I mean, that's one of the things. You're right. Like-minded people hang together, but when you're building a team, you need different types of skill set and advisors who have an array of different skill sets. One could be technical, one could be business, maybe one's financial. Having those skill sets, they're really important. And we've got to, Scott McNeely once told me, always go to areas that you fear the most. Scott McNeely was one of the founders of Sun Microsystems. And I had lunch with him a couple of years ago. Always go to areas that feel the most. You feel the most because you're going to learn the most. So get out there and try it. Don't be afraid. Go to diverse groups. Use things like LinkedIn and Facebook and personal connections to find those kind of advisors. And by the way, if they do have name brand recognition, it dramatically helps. So with that, Fabio, where are you with this? What do you think about the advisors, and what's the best way to find the right kind of people for your team?
The where to find people is more an art than a set of rules. You need to rely on people you trust, and because any advice involves choices. I mean, you have to trust the person who gives you advice. Often, in areas which you don't know anything about, not not so rarely, in areas where you know enough and you receive advice that is contrary to your instinct. So at that point, you need to make a choice. And so you need to rely on people you feel that are on the same wavelength as yours. Everybody has a plan. Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until you receive a punch in the face, and then the plan needs to be changed.
Unless you're somebody like Bruce Lee and you defend against it, right? You deflect.
Yeah. Now, I don't know any startup that has followed for more than, let's say, 3 months the original plan. So running a startup means being able to go through the meanders of an unknown territory, uncharted territory. And so that's why you need to have advisors or travel companions whom you trust, and who are able to warn you in advance of dangers, risks, and or possible solutions. So there isn't a rule book where you can get the right recipe. It's, as I said before, more of an art than something you can strictly follow and adopt and blindly pursue.
Now, you brought up a really good point, and I'm going to ask Raghu this. Raghu, you're a smart guy. You've done companies that have done over $1 billion in sales. But what happens if you get an advisor on board and the information they give you is diametrically opposed to what you think is your gut feeling is right? What do you do in that situation? So you get in, and it's an area that you're familiar with, but not nearly as familiar with as the advisors. What do you do?
Yeah, I think it's an important question, because usually the CEOs tend to be type A personalities with huge egos. The passion is important, so that comes with the territory in many cases. As you know, the profile, if you look at it, they're all D in the disc profile. Most of them are D or dominant profile. So it goes back to coachability or emotional intelligence. I think Julio referred to it a little bit. So the coachability is important, that you understand that all of us don't know what we don't know in some areas. And if you don't get the right advice, you'll never learn, because it's all about knowing what you don't know, then addressing, getting to know them, and the leadership that is required initially changes as you scale up, right? In terms of how much you delegate and things like that. Initially, maybe you can be the chief everything, but slowly you have to delegate and build the team up, right? So the advisors, I think one of the things I do when I am asked for advisory role in a company is first that the person is coachable and is willing to listen, so and take input. They ultimately, the CEO or the management team is going to call the shots in decision making, but they need to make sure that they get all the advice, so that they understand and make an informed decision, and they grow in areas where everybody can be expert in everything. So I think that's the key. And a part of in Vistage we have a what we call a clarification session. So anytime you bring up any issue, you have to listen without giving any prejudgment or solution or anything. It first is to frame the issue at hand correctly before you respond, because a lot of us tend to lead with an answer. When somebody comes up something, oh, have you tried this, right away, without digging deeper, like a root cause analysis. So that's very important. Again, in an advisory board meeting, you want to make sure anything that is brought up, you get to a level deeper and make sure that you are addressing the right issue, and then chime in with your solution, suggestion, whatever.
Remember, God gave you 2 ears and a mouth for a reason.
That's right. Absolutely.
Julio, so you come into a company. How in the world do you incentivize advisors to be part of it? I mean, because this isn't all about charity, right? It's about, what do you do to make it juicy for them?
Well, you make them a part of the team, right? You make them benefit from the success of the venture in some way. I think the whole idea about options and ownership in a venture is really the standard way that people get motivated. Employees, board members, advisors, everybody should be on the same boat if the venture succeeds, and guard against people who need to be compensated before the success of the venture, because then they're not going to really be married to the success of the venture. Invite people to invest is another good idea. I mean, you don't just have to give them things, but you could say, to the extent that people have funds. So New York Bay Capital has a small fund, and so when we look at entrepreneurs, we may give advice to 10 of them, but at least in 1 or 2 of them, we're also pitching or hoping to get invited to make an investment in some kind of a favorable term, so that you feel like you're being treated, well. I mean, that's pretty much what to do. But spend time with people as well, right? It's the demands on time of an entrepreneur are many. But if you're going to be listening to advice and having a board of advisors and all that, also make sure you have your regularly scheduled meetings, and make sure you do give a little bit of your time and share some information about your life, etc., so that there's that friendship. At some point, it's really not about dollars and cents. It's about there's additional satisfaction that we derive from people who succeed, not only because we helped them raise the capital or gave them the money, but because they also become our friends. And our goal is always to develop a long-term relationship with any company. So we're also going to be looking to that follow-up work and role. It's a combination of all of the above. It's maybe follow the advice is a really good way to build a relationship, right? Because consultants, a friend of mine from McKinsey once told me, their policy is, if they start noticing that their client does not follow the very well thought out advice and presented advice, it's time for kind of a final discussion with a client, and then probably a breakup, because that's not the point of the relationship of having an advisor. If the advisor feels like they're there only as a sounding board, but then other things happen, then the relationship starts to suffer. So maybe try to not get into those situations. Anyway, that's, I think.
No, that's great. Fabio, thank you, Julio. So Fabio, I want to go back to this point. Here you are, you're a PhD from the University of Chicago. Now, what happens to you when somebody, the same question I had to Raghu, somebody comes to you with an answer that's different than what you thought, diametrically opposed to what you believe is true? What do you do? What process do you take if somebody comes into you and gives you advice, but it's, the sales advice or marketing advice? What do you do?
I ask myself how many times this guy has done in the past. I mean, how many, in his professional or his experience, professional life or in his experience, has he faced a situation similar to this? And so if he has, then I tend to follow his advice. Otherwise, I try to verify maybe through a second opinion or through engaging in a discussion why he says, he gives me that advice, or what are the assumptions on which he bases his advice. Because it's what Julio was saying, it's very important to have a regular interaction between the startup and the advisor. So, for example, a weekly meeting is extremely, I would say it's crucial, because you need to build that relationship. In other words, the advice that goes counter to your beliefs shouldn't come out of the blue, because then it's very difficult to get the right chemistry. So the advice must be a process, not a one-off event. And I've seen things that you wouldn't believe. People who were extremely brilliant, to whom I would say, look, in 2 months you're running out of cash, so you must focus now on getting financial resources. And the answer was, oh, but I need to finish the product. I need to deliver this. So the picture of priorities was completely distorted. And often people, those who are most brilliant, those who are more technically savvy, have more difficulties in understanding what it takes in the real world, not only to succeed, but to stay afloat. Because they are so brilliant that they don't even contemplate the possibility that they won't be able to stay afloat. I can give you an example that has nothing to do with startup advice, but at the University of Chicago, the first quarter of the PhD program would see a good third of the class leaving for good. So because people could not stand, those people had always been the best in their field. Probably they were the best students in their country, or among the best students in their country, in their field. Coming to Chicago meant for them that they had to study a lot to do a lot of to put a lot of effort, and they would not be the best. They would be average at best, or sometimes way below average, and they could not stand the psychological burden. So often that is what happens with startups. Those who are the best have more difficulties to accept that they might be failing, and they need to take action to avoid that outcome.
No, that's great. And Fabio, how do people get a hold of you? What's your link? Best way is LinkedIn, Facebook?
LinkedIn or Facebook, yes. But if you type my last name, which is quite unusual, you'll be able to find all my whereabouts.
That's great. Now, Raghu, closing thoughts, and how do people get a hold of you?
Sure, I'm reachable on LinkedIn at Raghu S. Rao. And closing thoughts is, I think the advisors are very important. The advisory board is a key part of a startup, and even mature companies, obviously. But the type of advisors you have for mature companies is a little different than at the earlier stage, because advisors will be providing a key ongoing interactions, right? At much more frequent intervals, as Fabio was saying, almost on a weekly basis. And picking the right advisors, I think, is key for the founders to get credibility in order to be able to scale up quickly. So I think it's a very key thing that any startup founder needs to be looking at.
And how do people get a hold of you, Raghu?
On LinkedIn, Raghu S. Rao, I think is the best way to reach me.
He's a good guy. In fact, all the speakers today have been on many panels with him. All excellent. Julio, closing thoughts, and how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, everybody needs advice, even if you're the top, right? Novak Djokovic could have used some advice over the last few weeks. Yet he's at the top of his game, right? And yet
he got advice, but probably was the wrong one.
I mean, the guy either he is so stubborn, right? And now you're looking at a disaster in the making in terms of his professional career. I mean, all I'm saying is even the best people who are measurably the winners could use some advice, and if they follow it, right? So I think that's my parting thought. How to get a hold of me is well, LinkedIn works, but Marquez is not as rare as Scacciavillani. Sorry. So Julio A. Marquez on LinkedIn narrows it down, or email me at julio@nybaycapital, as it's on the screen.com.
Oh, that's great. Fantastic. So, I want to thank each and every one of you today for joining the show. Appreciate the guests. And to the audience out there, my name is Gary Fowler. It's great to have you. Stay tuned for another edition of LaToken VCTV tomorrow. Hasmic and the entire VCTV team, thank you for making it possible. Let's go get them, find the right advisors, get shit done, and stay happy, stay healthy, and stay safe. My name's Gary Fowler. See y'all later.